They say every man dies twice. Once when he takes his last breath, and once when his name is spoken for the final time. I'm Jun Seo Han. They used to call me the Viper of Seoul. But that man? He died 3 months ago in a shipyard in Busan, drowning in his own blood while the woman I loved screamed my name. What you're about to hear isn't a love story. It's a confession. It's the truth about what happens when you try to leave the underworld and the underworld decides you don't get to leave. It's about the night I had to choose between saving Sloan Mitchell's life and saving my own soul. Spoiler, I chose wrong. Or maybe I chose right. I still don't know. My uncle, Chairman Kong, once told me something I'll never forget. He said a viper can shed its skin, but it's still a serpent. He was right about that. But he forgot one thing. A serpent backed into a corner doesn't just strike. It burns the whole garden down. And that's exactly what I did. I burned everything. My inheritance. My empire. My name. All of it turned to ash in one night because the alternative was watching her die. This is part 2, the final chapter. And if you're wondering how a Korean Mafia boss and a black American photographer ended up in a war with the underworld, part 1 is linked in the description and pinned comment below. But you don't need it to understand what happens next. You just need to know this: she called me something that made me obsessed. She saw past the viper and found the man. And that man would burn the world for her. Before we dive into the darkness, before I tell you about the blood and the bullets and the betrayal, I need something from you. My wife and I are building this channel together, and she thinks we can't hit 1,000 subscribers. I told her we will, because you're here. So prove me right. Click that subscribe button right now, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Seoul? Atlanta? Somewhere in between? Let us know. We read every single one. Now, let's finish this story. Let me tell you about the last morning I woke up as the Viper of Seoul. Let me tell you about the phone call that changed everything. Let me tell you about how love doesn't conquer all, but sometimes, if you're willing to lose everything, it conquers enough. This is the end of the line. Stay until the very last minute, because what happens in the final 60 seconds will break you. I promise you that. Let's begin. I counted her breaths that morning. 43 inhales before my phone rang. 43 moments of peace before the world remembered we existed. Jeju Island. The hotel balcony overlooked black volcanic rocks and endless blue water. Sloane stood there in my shirt, black silk hanging off her shoulders, too big for her frame. She looked like a girl playing dress-up in a monster's clothes. Her camera was pressed to her face, capturing the sunrise like she could hold on to time itself if she just clicked the shutter fast enough. God, she was beautiful. That's the image I held onto later, when everything went to hell. Horror. That morning. That light painting her skin gold. The way she bit her bottom lip when she was concentrating. The way she didn't know I was watching her watch the world. I should have known peace like that doesn't last. Not for men like me. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I almost didn't answer it. Almost let it ring out. But instinct is a hard thing to kill, even when you're trying to be someone new. So I picked it up. Unknown number. I answered without speaking. That's the first rule: never give information before you receive it. But the voice on the other end wasn't my uncle's. It wasn't one of his men. It was sobbing. Desperate. Female. Mr. Han, they took me. Grace. Sloane's assistant. The girl who scheduled her photo shoots and brought her coffee and laughed too loud at terrible jokes. My blood went cold. Grace? I kept my voice steady. Where are you? I don't know. I don't. Her voice broke. They blindfolded me. They said if Sloane doesn't come back to Seoul by tonight, they'll send my fingers to her one by one. Please. Please, Mr. Han, I don't want to die. The line went dead. I didn't move. Couldn't. Because I was doing the math in my head and none of it added up to anything good. Grace had been in Seoul. We'd left her there with instructions to close Sloane's studio, ship her equipment, and meet us in 2 weeks. She wasn't supposed to be a target. She was nobody. Collateral. Innocent. Which meant my uncle wasn't playing chess anymore. He was playing scorched earth. C.O. Han? I looked up. Sloane was standing in the doorway, backlit by sunrise, her camera hanging around her neck. She'd heard my voice. Heard the tension in it. Who was that? I could have lied. Should have lied. Told her it was business, nothing important, go back to your photos. But I'd promised her something 2 weeks ago when we ran. I'd promised her honesty. No more secrets. No more Viper games. So I told her the truth. Grace. The color drained from her face. What? They have her. Sloane crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed the phone from my hand. Call back. Call her back right now. The line's dead. Then call someone else. Call your contacts. Call. She stopped. Looked at me. And I saw the moment she understood. They want me to come back. I nodded. If I don't, they'll kill her. I nodded again. Sloane's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to steady herself. Then we go back. No. C.O. Han. It's a trap, Sloane. You walk into Seoul, you don't walk out. Then what do we do? Her voice cracked. Not with fear. With fury. Let her die? Grace is 24 years old. She has a little brother in college. She sends half her paycheck home to her mom. She's got nothing to do with this. Nothing. And they're going to cut off her fingers because of me? I stood up, tried to reach for her, but she stepped back. No. Don't touch me right now. Just tell me. Tell me we have a plan. Tell me you can fix this. And that's when I realized something that made my chest tighten. I couldn't. The Viper could. The Viper always had a plan, always had leverage, always knew the angle. But the man standing in that hotel room in Jeju? The man who'd spent 2 weeks pretending he wasn't a monster? He had nothing. I'll make some calls, I said quietly. You'll make some calls, she repeated, hollow. That's it? Sloane. I'm coming with you. No. It's not a negotiation. She was already moving, grabbing clothes from the closet, stuffing them into a bag. You think I'm going to sit here and drink piña coladas while Grace gets tortured? You think I'm that person? I think you're the person they want. And I'm not giving them what they want. She stopped. Turned. Looked at me with those gray eyes that had seen through me from day one. Then what was the point, she asked. What was the point of any of this? You told me you were done with that life. You told me we could start over. But the second something goes wrong, you're right back to being him. The Viper. The man who makes the hard calls and sacrifices the pawns. Grace isn't a pawn. Then stop treating her like one. Sloane's voice echoed in the small room. Stop treating me like one. We go. Together. We figure it out. Together. Or what, you're just going to lock me in this hotel room while you play hero? I didn't answer. Because that's exactly what I was going to do. She saw it in my face. The decision I'd already made. And something in her expression broke. You don't trust me, she whispered. I trust you with everything except your own safety. That's not trust. That's control. She was right. God, she was right. But I didn't care. Because I'd rather have her hate me and alive than love me and dead. Pack your things, I said. We leave in 20 minutes. We? I'm taking you somewhere safe. Then I'm going to Seoul. Co Han. This isn't a discussion, Sloane. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Sharp and bitter. You know what you are? You're every man I've ever met who thought he knew better than me. You just wear a more expensive suit. She zipped her bag closed, slung it over her shoulder. Fine. Take me somewhere safe. Lock me up. But know this, whatever happens to Grace? That's on you. Not your uncle. You. She walked past me toward the door. And I let her. Because she was wrong. Whatever happened to Grace was on me. But so was whatever happened to Sloane. And between the two? There was no choice. I made my first mistake that morning. I thought I could negotiate with evil. I thought I could protect them both. I was wrong. And Grace paid for it. The private jet back to Seoul was silent except for the engine and Sloane's anger, which was somehow louder than both. She sat across from me, arms crossed, staring out the window at clouds that looked like they went on forever. She hadn't spoken to me since we left the hotel. Not in the car. Not during the security check. Not when I buckled her seatbelt because her hands were shaking too hard to do it herself. I made phone calls. 8 of them. My oldest contacts. Men who owed me favors. Men who feared me. Men who would burn cities if I asked. Every single one went to voicemail. Not unavailable. Not busy. Voicemail. Which meant one thing. They'd been told not to answer. My uncle hadn't just made a move. He'd burned the board. Every piece I had, every connection, every line of communication, he'd severed it. And he'd done it quietly, systematically, like a surgeon removing a tumor. I was alone. No. Worse than alone. I was isolated. And isolation is the first step to execution. Tell me the truth. I looked up. Sloane was still staring out the window, but her voice cut through the cabin like a blade. Can you save her? I wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her yes, of course, I'm the Viper of Seoul, I've ended men for less. But I'd promised her honesty. I don't know. She finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were red, but dry. Sloane didn't cry. I'd learned that about her. She burned instead. You don't know, she repeated. The man who controls half of Seoul doesn't know if he can save one girl. I don't control anything anymore. That's the point. I walked away. No. She shook her head. You ran away. There's a difference. You ran and you took me with you and you didn't think about the people we left behind. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed, sharp and humorless. You want to talk about fair? Grace is 24. Her biggest crime was working for me. And now she's going to die because her voice broke. She stopped. Breathed. Because we fell in love. The words hung in the air between us. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Sorry doesn't save her. I know. So what do we do? I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd walked into my gallery 3 months ago and called me beautiful like it was a weapon. This woman who'd seen the monster and decided to love it anyway. This woman who was sitting across from me, furious and terrified and still asking we. Not you. We don't trust anyone, I said finally. What? My uncle didn't just make a move. He compromised my entire network. Everyone I know, everyone I trust, they're either bought or dead. So we go alone. Alone, she repeated. The two of us against the Korean Mafia. Yes. That's insane. It's the only play we have left. She studied my face, looking for the lie. But there wasn't one. This was it. This was the truth I'd been avoiding since the phone call. I wasn't the Viper anymore. I was just a man. A man with a woman he loved and an enemy who had all the power. And men like that don't win. They survive. If they're lucky. My phone buzzed. I looked down. Video message. Unknown number. I didn't want to open it. Didn't want to see what I knew was coming. But Sloane was watching me, and I'd promised her the truth. So I clicked play. Sound design, muffled audio, the quality of a phone video. The video was shaky, handheld. It showed a concrete room. Industrial. Cold. And in the center, tied to a metal chair, was Grace. Her face was bruised. Her lips split. Her hands bound behind her back. But she was alive. Breathing. Conscious. Then the camera panned. And my uncle walked into frame. He looked the same as always. Expensive suit. Silver hair combed back. The face of a man who'd built an empire on other people's bones. He didn't look at the camera. He looked at Grace. "Nephew," he said in Korean. His voice was calm. Almost bored. "You have 6 hours. Bring the girl to the Namsan estate. Come alone. Or Mississippi Park here learns what happens to loose ends." He pulled a knife from his jacket. A small one. The kind you use for detail work. Grace started screaming. The video cut to black. Sloane grabbed my arm. "What did he say?" "Seo Han, what did he say?" I couldn't answer. Because I was staring at the screen, at the freeze frame of my uncle's face, and I was seeing something that made my blood freeze. The bruising on Grace's neck. Dark. Mottled. Consistent with ligature strangulation. Old bruising. At least 12 hours old. Which meant the video wasn't live. It was a recording. They'd already killed her. And this? This was theater. My uncle wasn't negotiating. He was playing. Watching me scramble. Watching me make mistakes. Because that's what you do to vipers. You make them strike at shadows until they're exhausted. Then you cut off their heads. Seo Han. Sloane's voice was sharp now. What did he say? I looked at her. This woman who'd given up everything to run away with a monster. This woman who was asking me to save someone who was already gone. And I made a choice. I lied. He said we have 6 hours to meet him. Grace for you. That's the trade. Then we go. We're not trading you for anyone. She's going to die. She's already dead, Sloane. The words came out before I could stop them. Cold. Clinical. True. Sloane went still. What? I showed her the video. Pointed to the bruising. Explained the timeline. Watched her face as she understood what I was saying. Grace had been dead before we even got on the plane. This wasn't a rescue. It was a trap. And the bait wasn't Grace. It was us. Sloane's hand went to her mouth. She stood up, stumbled toward the bathroom, and I heard her get sick. I didn't follow her. I just sat there, staring at my phone, at the frozen image of my uncle's face. And I realized something. This wasn't about the ledger. Wasn't about power or control or family legacy. This was about punishment. My uncle wanted me to watch her die. That was the game. Already dead in that video. I could tell by the bruising on her neck. They'd already killed her and filmed this hours ago. My uncle wasn't negotiating. He was playing. That's when I understood. Grace was never the target. Sloane was. And I'd left her alone. We landed in Seoul at 9 p.m. The city looked the same as always. Neon lights bleeding into rain-slicked streets. Cars honking. People moving like blood through veins. Beautiful and brutal and utterly indifferent to whether you lived or died. I'd always loved Seoul. Tonight, I hated it. Sloane hadn't spoken since the plane. She'd come out of the bathroom with her face washed and her jaw set and something in her eyes that looked like murder. Not rage. Colder than that. Calculation. She was planning something. I could see it. But I didn't have time to figure out what. I had 5 hours to save a woman who was already dead and protect the woman I loved from an uncle who wanted to watch her bleed. We took a car to a safe house in Gangnam. One of my oldest properties. Registered under a shell company that didn't trace back to me. 3 floors. Reinforced doors. Panic room in the basement. It was as safe as anywhere in Seoul could be. Which meant it wasn't safe at all. Stay here, I told Sloane as we walked in. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone but me. Where are you going? To get help. I thought you said we couldn't trust anyone. I said we couldn't trust my network. But there's one person who isn't part of it. Who? Min Jae. She blinked. Your driver? My brother. I'd never told her that. Never told her that Min Jae wasn't just the man who drove me to meetings. He was the boy who'd grown up 3 houses down from me. The only person in my childhood who'd seen me cry. The only person who'd ever called me by my real name instead of my title. The only person I trusted when trust was a currency I couldn't afford. I'll be back in 2 hours, I said. And if you're not? I didn't answer. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cold. Don't do this. Don't leave me here alone. It's the only way. It's not. Her voice was shaking now. Not with fear. With something bigger. You keep making decisions for me. You keep deciding what I can handle. But I'm here, Seo-han. I'm standing right here. And I'm telling you, don't leave me. I pulled her close. Kissed her forehead. Breathed her into vanilla and coffee and something uniquely Sloane. I love you, I said. That's why I'm leaving you. I felt her tense in my arms. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare make this about love. Love means trusting me. Love means letting me fight with you. Love means keeping you alive. Even if I hate you for it? Especially then. I stepped back. Looked at her one more time. Tried to memorize her face in case this was the last time I saw it. Then I walked toward the door. Seo-han. I stopped. Didn't turn around. If you die doing this, I'll never forgive you. I almost smiled. Get in line. The door closed behind me. Min Jae lived in Itaewon. A small apartment above a bar that smelled like grilled meat and bad decisions. I'd bought it for him 5 years ago. He'd refused at first, too proud, but I'd made it part of his salary. Told him it was just good business to keep your driver close. He'd seen through the lie. But he'd taken it anyway. I climbed the stairs. Knocked 3 times. Our code. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. Then I heard it. A low groan from inside. I kicked the door open. Min Jae was on the floor. Face down. Blood pooling under his chest. I crossed the room in 2 strides, rolled him over. His face was a mess. Broken nose. Split lip. One eye swollen shut. But he was breathing. Hyung, he rasped. Blood on his teeth. You're late. What happened? What do you think happened? He coughed. More blood. Your uncle's men. They came yesterday. Asked where you were. I told them to go to hell. They disagreed. Yesterday? My mind was racing. They've been watching you. They've been watching everyone. He tried to sit up, winced. You need to leave Seoul. Tonight. Take the girl and run. I can't. I stopped. Because explaining Grace felt impossible. It's complicated. It's always complicated with you. He grabbed my shirt, pulled me close. His breath smelled like copper. Listen to me. Your uncle isn't playing games anymore. He's going for the kill. You stay, you die. That's the math. I know. So why are you here? I looked at him. This man who'd taken a beating for me. Who'd lied for me. Who'd bled for me. Because I need one last favor. He laughed. It turned into a cough. You're insane. I know. What do you need? I told him the plan. Told him about Namsan Estate. Told him about the ledger. Told him what I needed him to do. He listened without interrupting. Then he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. If you go in there, you're not coming out. You know that, right? I know. And you're going anyway. Yes. For the girl. For Sloane. He studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. But I'm coming with you. Min Jae. I'm coming. He pushed himself to his feet, swayed, steadied. You think I'm going to let you die alone? After everything? No. We do this together. Like always. I should have said no. Should have told him to run. Should have protected him the way I was protecting Sloane. But I didn't. Because I was selfish. And because I was scared. And because I didn't want to die alone. Thank you, I said quietly. He clapped me on the shoulder. Don't thank me yet. We might not survive this. Probably won't. Definitely won't. He grinned through the blood. But at least we'll die with style. We drove back to the safe house. I needed to get supplies. The ledger. A gun. Maybe two. But when we pulled up to the building, my blood went cold. The door was open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open. I ran. Took the stairs 3 at a time. Hit the 3rd floor. Slammed through the apartment door. Empty. Sloane. No answer. I checked every room. The bedroom. The bathroom. The panic room. Nothing. Just a note on the kitchen counter. Written in Sloane's handwriting. I'm sorry. I can't let Grace die because of me. I'm going to Namsan. Don't follow me. I love you. S. I read it twice. Then I crumpled it in my fist and screamed until my throat bled. Min Jae put a hand on my shoulder. Hyung. She's going to die. My voice was hollow. She's walking into an execution and she doesn't even know it. Then we go get her. We don't have time. We make time. He grabbed my face, forced me to look at him. You told me once that love is the only thing worth dying for. So let's go die for her. I looked at him. This man who'd followed me into hell without asking why. And I made a decision. No more running, I said. No more running, he agreed. We end this tonight. We end this tonight. I pulled out my phone. Called the one number I'd been saving. It rang once. Then my uncle's voice. Nephew. I was wondering when you'd call. I'm coming, I said. But not for Grace. For you. Silence. Then a laugh. Cold and sharp. Good. I'll be waiting. The line went dead. I heard her screaming my name until the elevator doors closed. That sound? It followed me all the way to hell. Before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so much you'd die for them? That's what this is. And if you're feeling this in your chest right now, that tightness, that ache, then we've done our job. My wife said this chapter would make people cry. I said it would make them feel. Hit that subscribe button if you're feeling it, and tell us where you're watching from. We're reading every single comment. Now, back to the story, because it gets darker from here.
Let me tell you something about being underestimated. These men locked me in a room and thought I'd wait like a good little victim. They forgot I'm from Atlanta. We don't wait. We move. Sloan Mitchell. That's me. And I'm going to tell you this part because C.O. Han doesn't know it. He thinks I'm reckless, impulsive, emotional. He's wrong. I'm tactical. The moment that door closed, the moment I heard his footsteps fade down the hallway, I stopped crying. Wiped my face. And I started looking. Because here's what C.O. Han forgot. I'm a photographer. I see things other people miss. Light. Shadow. Angles. Weaknesses. The window lock was old. Corroded. The kind of lock that looks secure but hasn't been maintained in years. I'd noticed it the second we walked in. Filed it away. Didn't think I'd need it. I needed it. I grabbed a hairpin from my bag. Not because I'm some spy or action hero. Because I spent 6 months in Syria photographing a civil war, and a journalist there taught me how to pick basic locks. Said it might save my life someday. She was right. It took me 4 minutes to pop the lock. Another 2 to wedge the window open. The apartment was 3 floors up. No fire escape. Just a ledge about 8 inches wide that ran along the building. I looked down. Bad idea. I looked across. The next building was maybe 6 feet away. There was a balcony. If I could get to it. No. Stop. You're not doing this. You're going to fall and die, and C.O. Han is going to find your body on the pavement, and Grace's face flashed in my mind. Tied to that chair. Bruised and terrified. I climbed out the window. Sound design. Wind. Distant traffic. Breathing heavy. The ledge was narrower than it looked. My hands were shaking. My legs were shaking. Everything was shaking. But I moved. 1 foot in front of the other. Don't look down. Don't think. Just move. I reached the corner of the building. The balcony was right there. 6 feet. Maybe 7. I could make it. Probably. I jumped. Sound of impact. Gasping. My hands caught the railing. My body slammed into the concrete. Pain shot up my ribs. But I held on. I pulled myself up. Over. Collapsed on the balcony floor. For 10 seconds, I just breathed. Then I stood up, brushed myself off, and I started planning. Because here's what C.O. Han didn't understand. I wasn't going to Namsan to die. I was going to save Grace. Or burn the whole estate trying. Music shifts to something determined. I found a phone. Called the one person C.O. Han told me never to call. Detective Park. He answered on the 3rd ring. Miss Mitchell. His voice was rough. Older. I was wondering if you'd reach out. You know what's happening. I know your assistant was taken. I know Chairman Kong is making a move. I know your boyfriend is about to do something very stupid. Can you help? Silence. Then, why would I? Because you hate them. The Gurong Circle. They killed your daughter. More silence. Heavier this time. How do you know that? C.O. Han told me. He said you were the only cop in Seoul who couldn't be bought. So I'm asking, can you help me save Grace? Grace Park is dead, Miss Mitchell. The words hit like a fist. What? We found her body this morning. Dumped in the Han River. She'd been dead for at least 12 hours before the video was sent. I couldn't breathe. No, that's... I'm sorry, but your boyfriend already knows this. The bruising. The timeline. He's known since he saw the video. He knew. C.O. Han knew Grace was dead. And he didn't tell me. Then what was the point? My voice cracked. Why take her? Why send the video? Because the target was never Grace, Detective Park said quietly. It was you. Chairman Kong wants you at that estate. And now you're going to walk right in. So stop me. I can't. You're not under arrest. You haven't committed a crime. All I can do is tell you the truth. If you go to Namsen, you die. That's not a threat. It's a fact. Then help me change the facts. He laughed, bitter and sharp. You sound like him. Your boyfriend. Same arrogance. Same belief that you can outsmart the devil. He's not arrogant. He's desperate. And so am I. Silence. Then, Grace isn't at Namsen. I froze. What? The video. I analyzed the background. Industrial space. Concrete walls. Shipping containers in the frame. That's not Namsen Estate. That's the Busan shipyards. The Circle's smuggling operation. So if Seo Han goes to Namsen, he walks into an execution, while you walk into a different one 300 kilometers away. My mind was racing. He doesn't know. No. And he won't. Because his phone is compromised. His contacts are compromised. Everything is compromised. The chairman made sure of it. Then I have to warn him. You can't. The second you contact him, they'll know. And they'll move the pieces. So what do? Detective Park was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's a car outside. Black sedan. Keys in the ignition. Get in. I'll drive. We go to Busan. We get there before the chairman's men. We end this. Why are you helping me? Because I couldn't save my daughter. But maybe I can save you. And maybe, just maybe, if we burn the Circle to the ground, she can rest. I looked out the window. Saw the black sedan. Saw the choice in front of me. Go to Busan. Try to save a woman who's already dead. Or go to Seo Han. Try to save the man I love. But if I went to Seo Han, we'd both die. And the Circle would win. I'll be down in 2 minutes, I said. I grabbed a jacket. A knife from the kitchen. My camera. Don't ask me why I took the camera. Maybe I thought I'd need proof. Maybe I thought if I died, someone should document it. Or maybe I just couldn't leave without it. I ran down the stairs. Hit the street. The sedan was exactly where Detective Park said it would be. I got in. He was in the driver's seat. Older than I expected. Gray hair. Tired eyes. A scar on his left cheek that looked like it had a story. You ready? He asked. No. Good. Only fools are ready for war. He put the car in drive. And we raced toward Busan. How long do we have? I asked. 2 hours. Maybe less. And if we don't make it in time? He looked at me. And I saw the truth in his eyes. Then we pray your boyfriend is as smart as he thinks he is. I had 2 hours to cross 325 kilometers. Seo Han didn't believe in miracles. Good thing I did.
Namsan Estate sits on top of a hill overlooking Seoul. It's beautiful in the way that powerful things are beautiful. Cold. Perfect. Untouchable. I'd been there twice as a child. Once for my father's funeral. Once for my mother's. I hated it both times. Now I was walking through the gates for the 3rd time. And I knew I wouldn't leave. Min Jae was beside me. He'd insisted on coming. Broken ribs and all. Said he didn't spend 20 years watching my back just to stop now. I told him he was an idiot. He told me that's why we were brothers. The guards at the gate didn't stop us. Didn't even search us. Because my uncle wanted me armed. Wanted me dangerous. It made the game more interesting. We walked through the gardens. Stone paths. Cherry trees that weren't blooming yet. Koi ponds with fish the size of small dogs. Everything was exactly as I remembered. Except the silence. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of our footsteps and my heartbeat. This is wrong, Min Jae muttered. I know. We should leave. We can't. Why not? Because she's already here. We reached the main house. Traditional Korean architecture. Wood and paper and careful craftsmanship. The kind of house that took 3 generations to build and 1 match to destroy. The door was open. We walked in. My uncle was sitting at a low table in the center of the room. Tea prepared. 2 cups. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. His hair was more gray than black now. His hands had a slight tremor. He looked almost sad. That's when I knew I'd miscalculated. This wasn't about power. Wasn't about the family name or the Gurung circle or any of that. This was about grief. Nephew. He gestured to the cushion across from him. Sit. Where is she? Sit. We'll talk. Then you'll see her. I want to see her now. And I want many things I cannot have. Sit. I looked at Min Jae. He shook his head slightly. Don't do it. It's a trap. But I sat anyway. Because what else could I do? My uncle poured tea. Slid a cup toward me. Do you remember your father? He asked. No. You were 5 when he died. Old enough to remember something. I remember his funeral. Do you remember how he died? I didn't answer. He chose a woman over the family, my uncle said quietly. Her name was Yuki. She was Japanese. The family didn't approve. So they made him choose. Her or the circle. He chose her. Yes. And they killed him for it. Shot him in the street like a dog. Then they killed her. Made it look like an accident. You were at school. By the time you came home, they were both gone. I'd heard this story before. Pieces of it. But never from him. Why are you telling me this? Because I loved your father. His voice cracked. Just slightly. He was my younger brother. And I watched him throw away everything, his name, his power, his future, for a woman who would have left him eventually anyway. You don't know that. I know that love is temporary. Power is not. Power is all temporary. He smiled. Sad and bitter. You sound like him. Your father. Same arrogance. Same belief that you can change the rules. I'm not trying to change the rules. I'm trying to leave the game. There is no leaving. You know that. You've always known that. He sipped his tea. So when I see you throwing away everything, disgracing our name, running away with some American girl, I see him. And I can't. I can't watch you die too. Then let me go. I can't. Why not? Because if I let you go, the family sees weakness. And weakness is death. So instead. He set down his cup. I'll save you the trouble. I'll kill her first. My blood went cold. You don't have to do this. Yes. I do. Because I love you. And I'd rather you hate me and live than love her and die. The door behind me opened. I turned. And Grace walked in. Alive. Shaking. Bruised but breathing. My mind went blank. How? The body in the river wasn't her, my uncle said calmly. It was another girl. Similar build. Similar age. Enough to fool the police. Enough to fool you. Grace's eyes were wide. Terrified. She looked at me and mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. She called us, my uncle continued. 3 days ago. Said she wanted to make a deal. Information about Sloan Mitchell's schedule. Her routines. Her weaknesses. In exchange for money and protection. No. Grace didn't betray you, nephew. She just wanted to survive. Can you blame her? I looked at Grace. Looked at the fear in her eyes. The shame. And I understood. She'd been terrified. Alone. And my uncle had offered her a way out. She'd taken it. Where is Sloan? I asked quietly. On her way to Busan. Detective Park is driving her. They think they're saving Grace. They think they're clever. He smiled. They're walking into the real trap. I stood up. If you hurt her. You'll what? My uncle stood too. Destroy the circle? Burn the empire? You already tried that, nephew. And it didn't work. Because you're not your father. You're smarter. Colder. You're the viper. And vipers don't die for love. They kill for it. He pulled a gun from his jacket. Pointed it at Grace. So choose. Her life. Or the girl you love. One walks out of here. One dies. You decide. That's when I understood. Grace was never the target. Sloane was. And I'd left her alone. I didn't think. I moved. Grabbed the tea table. Flipped it toward my uncle. The gun went off. The bullet hit the wall. Min Jae tackled Grace. Got her to the ground. Covered her with his body. I ran. Out the door. Down the hall. Guards were everywhere. But they weren't expecting me to run toward them. I hit the first one with my shoulder. Grabbed his gun. Shot the second. The third grabbed me from behind. I drove my elbow into his ribs. Spun. Shot him in the leg. Min Jae was right behind me. Grace between us. We moved like we'd done this 1,000 times. Because we had. Just never like this. Never for stakes this high. We hit the courtyard. My car was still there. Keys in my pocket. Get in. Min Jae shoved Grace into the back seat. I jumped behind the wheel. Engine roared. Bullets hit the windshield. Spider cracks. But the glass held. I floored it. Sound of tires screeching, engine roaring. We blew through the gates. Took the turn too fast. Nearly flipped. But I held it. Soul blurred past. Neon. Rain. People diving out of the way. Where are we going? Min Jae shouted. Busan. That's 300 kilometers. I know. We'll never make it in time. We have to. Because Sloane was walking into a trap. And if I didn't get there first, she was dead. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. You're making a mistake, nephew. My uncle. His voice calm. Like we were discussing dinner plans. You can't get to Busan in time. And even if you do, you can't stop what's coming. Let her go. Walk away. I'll give you one last chance. Go to hell. I'm already there. I've been there for 50 years. And I'm not letting you join me. The line went dead. We hit the outskirts of Busan at 11:47 p.m. The shipyards were dark. Massive cargo containers stacked like building blocks. Cranes looming like sleeping giants. Detective Park killed the lights. Coasted to a stop. How many men? I asked. Too many. That's not a number. It's the truth. He opened the glove box. Pulled out a gun. Handed it to me. Do you know how to use this? Point. Shoot. Don't die. Close enough. I saw the black sedan as we pulled into the shipyards. Recognized it immediately. Detective Park. Which meant Sloane was already here. Min Jae. I see it. We parked behind a container. Got out. Guns drawn. And that's when the shooting started. Bullets ricocheted off steel. Sparks in the darkness. I couldn't see who was shooting. Couldn't see Sloane. I just ran toward the gunfire. Because that's where she'd be. I heard him before I saw him. His voice cutting through the chaos. Sloane. I turned. And there he was. Jun Seo Han. The Viper of Seoul. Running toward me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. You're supposed to be in Seoul. I shouted. So are you, he shouted back. We'd both been played. And now we were both going to die. We both arrived at the shipyards at midnight. Neither of us knew the other was there. That's when the shooting started. I found Sloane crouched behind a shipping container. She had a gun in her hands. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat. She looked at me like I was a ghost. You're supposed to be in Seoul. So are you. We'd both been played. And now we were both going to die. But at least we'd die together. How many? I asked. I counted 12. Maybe more. Where's Detective Park? Pinned down. East side. He's running out of ammunition. Min Jae? Is that the guy who's been shooting from the crane? I looked up. Sure enough. Min Jae had climbed one of the massive cranes and was picking off targets from above. Even with broken ribs. Even bleeding. Idiot. Hero. Brother. Grace? Sloane asked. In the car. Safe. She's alive? Yes. But the body wasn't her. My uncle lied. About all of it. Sloane's face went through about 6 different emotions. Settled on fury. I'm going to kill him. Get in line. Footsteps. Heavy. Multiple. They were closing in. I grabbed Sloane's hand. When I say run, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get to the car. Get Grace. Get out. What about you? I'll buy you time. No. Sloane. No. She grabbed my face. Forced me to look at her. I didn't cross 300 kilometers just to watch you die playing hero. We leave together or we don't leave at all. That's not an option. Then make it one. You're the Viper, right? The man who controls Seoul? So control this. Figure it out. Because I'm not leaving you. I looked at this woman. This impossible, stubborn, beautiful woman who'd walked into hell because she couldn't let someone die alone. And I realized something. She was right. I'd been trying to save her by keeping her away. By making her safe. By controlling every variable. But that's not love. Love is trusting someone to stand with you. Even when standing means dying. All right, I said. Together. Together. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a voice I recognized. Nephew. I know you're here. I can feel you. Chairman Kong. He stepped into view. Flanked by 20 men. All armed. All trained. All loyal. He looked calm. Almost peaceful. Like this was exactly where he wanted to be. You couldn't just let her go, could you? He called out. I stood up. Sloane tried to pull me back down, but I shook my head. Stepped into the open. No, I said. Because she's not a possession. She's not a weakness. She's the only thing I've ever done right. My uncle smiled. Sad and proud at the same time. Your father said the same thing about Yuki. And then he died. Maybe dying for love is the point. Or maybe it's just dying. He raised his hand. 20 guns pointed at me. This was it. The end. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. The Gurong ledger. 50 years of crimes compressed into 8 gigabytes. You want this? I held it up. Here's the deal. You let everyone walk. Sloane. Grace. Detective Park. Min Jae. And I'll give you the ledger. You'll never hear from us again. And what makes you think I won't just take it after I kill all of you? I smiled. Because I already uploaded it. Cloud storage. Encrypted. Set to release to every major news outlet in 12 hours unless I input a code. You kill me, the timer runs out. And when it does, every bribe, every murder, every dirty secret the circle has buried for half a century? It goes public. Politicians, judges, police chiefs, all of them. The empire doesn't just fall. It burns. Silence. My uncle stared at me. Then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Deep and bitter and broken. You really are your father's son. He lowered his hand. The guns lowered. You'd destroy everything. Your fortune. Your name. Your future. All of it. For her. Yes. Why? Because she's worth it. He looked at Sloane. Really looked at her. Like he was seeing her for the first time. What did you do to him? He asked. How did you turn a viper into a man? Sloane stood up. Walked to stand beside me. Took my hand. I called him beautiful, she said simply. And I meant it. My uncle's face cracked. Just for a second. I saw the grief there. The loss. The decades of watching people he loved die for the wrong reasons. Go, he said quietly. What? Go. He holstered his gun. Signaled his men to stand down. Run. Take your girl. Take your friends. Leave Korea. And never come back. Uncle. You were right. Love isn't a prison. Fear is. I've been afraid for so long I forgot what it's like to be free. Maybe you deserve better than that. He turned to walk away. Then he stopped. But know this. You'll spend every day looking over your shoulder. The circle is bigger than me. And they won't forgive this. So run fast. Run far. And pray they never find you. Sloane stepped forward. Then come with us. My uncle looked at her. Surprised. What? Come with us. Leave. Start over. You don't have to die for this. For a moment, just a moment, I saw him consider it. Saw the man he might have been if he'd made different choices. Then he shook his head. I'm too old to run, child. And I've done too much to be forgiven. But you? He looked at me. You still have time. Don't waste it. He walked into the darkness. His men followed. And just like that, we were alone. Sloane grabbed my face. Kissed me. Hard and desperate and alive. We need to go, she said. I know. We ran. Back to the car. Grace was there. Shaking but alive. Min Jae climbed down from the crane. Detective Park emerged from behind a container. We were all bleeding. All terrified. All alive. Everyone in. I shouted. We piled into the car. I started the engine. 10 steps toward freedom. 15. 20. Sloane was laughing. Actually laughing. That beautiful, impossible sound. We did it, she said. The bullet wasn't meant for me. Pause. Right here. I know you want to know what happens next. So do I, and I wrote this. But before we continue, remember that subscribe button? My wife still doesn't think we'll hit 1,000. Prove her wrong. Click it. Tell us where you're from. And then, let's see who got shot. The bullet wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Sloane. But Min Jae broken ribs, punctured lung, barely standing, threw himself in front of her. I watched my brother fall in slow motion. Again. Min Jae. I was on the ground beside him. His shirt was soaked red. Too much red. He looked up at me. Tried to smile. Blood on his teeth. You were always too soft, Hyung. Don't talk. Don't, we'll get you to a hospital. No hospital. He coughed. More blood. Listen. Listen to me. I leaned closer. Sloane was beside me, her hands pressed against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. But there was too much. Too fast. Tell them. Min Jae's voice was fading. Tell them I died a hero. You're not dying. Yes. I am. He grabbed my collar. Pulled me close. Go. Be soft somewhere else. That's an order. Min Jae. Brother. His eyes were clear. Peaceful. Thank you. For letting me matter. His hand went slack. His eyes went empty. And Jun Min Jae, my driver, my brother, my friend, died in a shipyard in Busan with my name on his lips. I'd cried twice in my life. When my mother died. And that night. I screamed until my throat bled. Until my voice was just sound. Until Sloane wrapped her arms around me and held me while I shattered. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But sorry doesn't bring back the dead. Sorry doesn't make heroes breathe again. Detective Park grabbed my shoulder. We have to go. Now. They're regrouping. I'm not leaving him. He died so you could live. Don't make it meaningless. I looked at Min Jae's body. Wanted to stay. Wanted to carry him out. Wanted to give him the funeral he deserved. But Detective Park was right. Min Jae died for this. For us. For freedom. I couldn't waste it. We drove in silence. Grace was crying in the back seat. Sloane's hand was in mine, but her eyes were somewhere else. Detective Park drove like a man who'd seen too much death to be surprised by more. 3 hours later, we crossed into a safe zone. A small town near the coast where Detective Park had contacts. A place to hide. To heal. To figure out what came next. He pulled into an alley. Killed the engine. This is as far as I go, he said. What? I have to go back. Clean this up. Make sure the ledger upload works. Make sure your uncle keeps his word. He'll kill you. Maybe. But I'm old. I'm tired. And I've been wanting to burn them down since my daughter died. You gave me the match. Now let me light the fire. I looked at this man. This stranger who'd saved us. Why did you help us? He smiled. Sad and tired. Because you reminded me that some things are worth dying for. And I'd forgotten that. He handed me an envelope. New identities. Passports. Cash. Enough to start over somewhere they'll never find you. Where do we go? Anywhere but here. He got out of the car. Started walking away. Then stopped. Mr. Han? Yes? Your brother. Min Jae. He came to me 2 days ago. Said if anything happened to him, I should give you this. He handed me a folded piece of paper. Blood-stained. Written in Min Jae's handwriting. I opened it. The ledger was never the answer. Love is. Tell Seo Han he's free now. Tell him to be the man, not the viper. Tell him I'm proud of him. Min Jae. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully. Put it in my pocket. Right over my heart. Music swells, then breaks into something heartbreaking. Min Jae had known he was going to die. He'd known all along. And he went anyway. Because that's what brothers do. 3 weeks later. A hospital in Tokyo. Rain on the windows. The smell of antiseptic and old coffee. I sat in a chair by the window, staring at nothing. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Min Jae falling. Heard the gunshot. Felt his hand go slack. The door opened. Sloane walked in with 2 cups of coffee. She was thinner. Haunted. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she was alive. She handed me a cup. Sat beside me. We didn't speak. What do you say after you watch a man die for you? Thank you doesn't cover it. I'm sorry is an insult. So we sat in silence and learned how to be broken together. My phone rang. Detective Park. I answered. It's done, he said. His voice sounded older. The ledger went public this morning. Every news station in Korea is running the story. Politicians are resigning. Police chiefs are being arrested. The Guron circle is finished. And my uncle? Silence. He's dead. Shot himself last night. Left a note. Said he was too old to start over, but you weren't. Said he was proud of you. I couldn't speak. You're free, Mr. Han. Whatever you were, whatever name you carried, it's over. You can be anyone now. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your brother. He's the one who made this possible. The line went dead. I set the phone down. Told Sloane what he'd said. She didn't react. Just sipped her coffee and stared out the window. I can't take photos anymore, she said quietly. I looked at her. What? Every time I look through a lens, all I see is Min Jae falling. I see Grace's face when she betrayed us. I see you, screaming. I see blood. She turned to me. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. I'm broken, Seo Han. Then we'll be broken together. What if we don't heal? Then we'll just be. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her. And we sat like that for a long time. 2 broken people. Pretending to be whole. Music shifts slightly, something like hope trying to break through. We can't go back to Korea, she said. No. We can't go back to Atlanta. No. So where do we go? I thought about it. About all the cities in the world where no one knew the Viper. Where Jun Seo-han could just be. June. Lisbon, I said. Portugal? Portugal. A city by the ocean. Where no one knows us. Where we can start over. Sloane was quiet for a moment. Then, will they find us? Maybe. And if they do? Then we run again. Or we fight. Or we die. I don't know. But at least we'll do it together. She looked up at me. Really looked at me. Searching for the lie. But there wasn't one. Okay, she said. Lisbon. 2 days later, we boarded a plane. Grace came with us. She'd cry for 3 days straight after Min Jae died. Said it should have been her. Said she'd never forgive herself. I told her forgiveness wasn't the point. Living was. She didn't believe me. But she came anyway. As the plane took off, Sloane grabbed my hand. Do you regret it? She asked. Giving up everything? I thought about it. About the empire I'd built. The power. The fear. The Viper. No, I said. I don't miss it. I miss Min Jae. I miss who I was before I knew what blood smelled like. But the empire? That wasn't me. It was a ghost I wore. And now I'm just a man. A man who loves you. And that's enough. She smiled. Sad and soft and real. What do we do when we get there? You open a photography studio. I said I can't. You can. You will. Because that's who you are. And I don't know. Get a job. Work in a bookstore. Make coffee. Live like a normal person. You? Normal? Stranger things have happened. She laughed. It was small and broken. But it was a laugh. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd be okay. But here's the thing about running from the past. It doesn't care how far you go. One chapter left. And it's going to change everything. But first, if you've made it this far, you're invested. You care. And that means everything to us. My wife and I started this channel because we believe in stories that matter. Stories that make you feel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Tell us where in the world you are. And let's finish this together. 6 months later. Lisbon, Portugal. A city of hills and sunlight. Of tile and cobblestone and endless blue sky. A small photography studio sits near the Tagus River. The sign above the door reads, Ghost Light Photography, S. Mitchell, Proprietor. Inside, Sloane was adjusting a light. A little girl sat in a chair, wearing a yellow dress, gap-toothed smile bright as the sun. Okay, sweetie, Sloane said in careful Portuguese. Big smile. Think about ice cream. Your favorite ice cream. The girl giggled. The shutter clicked. Perfect. Sloane showed the mother the photo. The woman's face lit up. They spoke in rapid Portuguese. Sloane's was getting better, but still rough around the edges. Money exchanged hands. The mother and daughter left. Sloane stood in the empty studio for a moment. Looked at her camera. At the light. At the space she'd built from nothing. Then she smiled. Small. Sad. But real. She could see through the lens again. Not without pain. Never without pain. But she could see. I walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. No suit. Just jeans and a black t-shirt. My hair was longer now. I looked like a different person. I was a different person. How'd it go? I asked in English. Good. She's a natural. Reminded me of my niece back in Atlanta. You miss home? She thought about it. Sometimes. But this is home now. I handed her the coffee. She took it. Sipped. Made a face. You still make terrible coffee. I'm learning. You've been learning for 6 months. It's a process. She laughed. That sound still did something to me. Made me feel human. We walked to the river. Sat on a bench overlooking the water. Tourists passed by. Couples holding hands. Families taking photos. Normal people living normal lives. We almost looked like them. Almost. Do you miss it? Sloane asked. The power? No. I miss Min Jae. I miss who I was before I knew what blood smelled like. But the empire? That wasn't me. It was a ghost I wore. Do you think they'll find us? Maybe. And if they do? Then we run again. Or we fight. Or we die. I don't know. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I love you, you know that? I know. Even though you make terrible coffee. Especially because of that. She laughed again. And for a moment, everything was perfect. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't check it. Almost let it go. But old habits are hard to kill. I looked at the screen. Photo message. I opened it. It was Grace. Standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. New York City. She looked healthy. Happy. Alive. The message below read. I'm sorry. I owed you the truth. The chairman isn't in prison. He paid his way out last month. The circle is regrouping. They're looking for you. I thought you should know. Run. Gee. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Sloane looked over. What was that? Nothing. Spam. She didn't believe me. I could tell. But she didn't push. Instead, she took my hand. Whatever it was, she said quietly. We'll deal with it. Together? Together. Music returns, but different now, uncertain, unresolved. I looked out at the river. At the sun setting over Lisbon. At this life we'd built from ash and blood and impossible love. And I made a choice. Not to run. Not to fight. Just to live. For however long I had. Some of you are screaming at your screens right now. Run. He's coming. But here's what I learned, you can't run forever. Eventually, you have to stop and decide, am I going to live in fear, or am I going to live? I chose to live. Maybe the chairman finds me. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe I die tomorrow in a Lisbon alley, or maybe I die in 50 years with Sloane's hand in mine. Either way, I loved her. Completely. Destructively. Beautifully. And that's enough. The Viper is dead. Jun Seo Han is alive. And he's done apologizing for choosing love over blood. This is the end of the story. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. Thank you for caring. My wife and I read every comment, and were blown away by you. We're just two people trying to build something real here. So share this video. Tell someone about it. And if we hit 1,000 subscribers? Maybe, just maybe, there's one more chapter left. Maybe the Viper has one last fight in him. Or maybe, some stories are better left unfinished. The choice is yours. Let us know in the comments. Stay dangerous.